By the way, I did really badly in school. Like
Really?
I know
I
people
would not
like
believe that.
honestly, like this is not to be arrogant. I think people see, hey, you've succeeded a bit entrepreneurially and therefore you must be smart. I had awful grades, Serena. Awful. We had 250 kids in my high school graduating class, and I think I was ranked like 175th.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I was like bottom tier of like a public school that lets anybody in, and so I think that propelled me to say, hey, I don't want structure in my life in a traditional job, and I think that that's kind of probably what indirectly led me to entrepreneurship.
Hi, I'm Serena Barwani, and I'm really excited to be here today. They say there's no formula for success, but what if there is? After countless conversations with entrepreneurs, I've noticed a pattern. Now, I'm on a mission to break it down and figure out exactly what makes a startup thrive. In this podcast, we'll explore the key ingredients funding, timing, leadership, and more that contribute to startup success. We'll ask founders to weigh in on what factors matter the most to them so you can focus on what really moves the needle in your own journey. Ready to crack the code? Let's dive into the entrepreneur's equation. So today's guest is Sujay Tyle. Sujay Tyle is a remarkable individual whose accomplishments defy expectations. While most students graduate high school by the age of 18, at 15, Sujay Tyle went to Harvard University. At 17, he was awarded a Thiel Fellowship. He graduated with a bachelor's degree, an MBA from Harvard Business School, and a Juris Doctor from Harvard Law School. Sujay co-founded Frontier Car Group at 23, raising over $200 million before the company was acquired for $750 million in an all-cash deal, further cementing his place in the tech and automotive industries. Named in Forbes 30 Under 30 and Goldman Sachs Top 100 Intriguing Entrepreneurs. At 27, he co-founded his second company, Morama, a unicorn. Sujay's story is one of bold moves and big successes. Let's dive into what drives his success equation. So Sujay, hi, and welcome to the podcast and welcome to Singapore. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much, Serena, for having me. And it's a really exciting podcast that you're doing. So I'm excited to talk to you about it.
You're my first guest. Are you enjoying Singapore?
I love Singapore. I think that Singapore it's interesting. I've never worked in Singapore, so Singapore is really family reasons and friends. But it's kind of this really nice, glitterous epicenter of Asia where there's so much capital, there's such cool entrepreneurs, everything's clean and nice, and so it's a pleasure to be here.
What have you done so far here? Have you visited any tourist attractions?
What have I done so far? I've done a little bit. I have gone to, I think we did a kayaking expedition to Malaysia, which is very cool that you can kayak to another country. I've gone to Marina Bay Sands, obviously. To be fair, I haven't spent tons of time here, but in the few days I've had, I've gotten to do some very cool things.
Okay. So I hear congratulations are in order.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is I got engaged this past Saturday.
Who's the lucky?
Today's what, a Wednesday or Thursday, and so 5-6 days ago. Yeah, I'm really excited. Hopefully we'll get married soon.
Yeah. Let's dive into some questions. I'm going to ask you some personal questions tailored to you, and then we'll do some professional about your company.
Perfect.
Okay.
Sounds great.
So I recently met your father and mother, and they mentioned that they attribute your success to always keeping you and your brother busy during summer holidays. Do you agree with this, and what do you think were some of the formative activities that helped you?
That's a really good question. Maybe I'll take even a step further back, Serena, and tell you about my parents and my family. And my parents were born and raised in India, like yours. You're actually not, I guess, like yours, but probably your extended family. And they immigrated to the United States in order to have an education, in order to provide for ourselves. And they had an arranged marriage, so they're very traditional. And I think coming from an immigrant background, which you can probably relate to, there was a massive focus on education and seizing opportunities from a very young age. And that didn't mean breaking any rules. It didn't mean, not having a childhood, quote unquote, which I think a lot of people kind of attribute to such immigrant parents. But I think what it meant was not wasting these opportunities to kind of discover what I was passionate about. And I have an older brother, by the way, so the same applies to my brother, Thiel. And so what that meant was, from a very young age, my parents pushed my brother and I to explore.
So were you?
And explore could mean a lot of different things. It could mean sports, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you do any sports, but I think that getting into sports early was such a cool way to discover what are our athletic interests. Music, we played piano and violin. We dabbled in other instruments, but it also meant, professional. When I was quite young, my father, who's a scientist, he pushed my brother and I to explore science and to think about, hey, what can we do research-wise outside of just school, where we would just take typical classes. And so we did research in a local university, and that ended up, becoming a really big part of my childhood. And I maybe we'll talk about that in this podcast. But I think the conclusion of that, and I think to answer your question, is my parents pushed both of us to explore such that at a young age we had a clearer sense of what we were interested in, but more than that, the confidence to think about, hey, wow, I am young, but I can do something, and I can actually do something real. And so, yeah, I attribute that push 100% to my parents, and that was really lucky.
So circling back to your brother Thiel, you've mentioned him before, and you've said that he's one of your mentors and that you look up to him. In which way did he mentor you?
It's funny because I'm curious to hear what my parents told you when you met them, because I'm sure that they probably have a maybe a unique view, but maybe some overlap here. My brother's 2.5 years older than me. Okay, so I'm 31. My brother's 33, and will be 34 soon. And my brother was my mentor in all sorts of ways. My brother was homecoming king. I don't know if they have homecoming king in Singapore, but he was always the popular one. It's in the U.S. It's like a dance football game where they select one kid to be representing your grade, and it's basically a popularity contest. But my brother won, and everyone loved him, and I was like, holy crap, I want to be like this guy. It's funny, actually. I mean, this is a total tangent, but MySpace was a thing. Did you ever have a MySpace profile?
No.
You never did? Okay. Well, MySpace was a thing. I'm older than you. And on my MySpace profile, I didn't have many friends, but my brother did. And I used his picture as my MySpace profile picture, which sounds really sad in retrospect. But I had used his picture in order to get more friends. And his name is Thiel, obviously same last name. Yeah. And my name was S.Tyle. So I was like, wow, I can basically be my brother. And it just turned out I was running my brother's MySpace for a long time. It wasn't even my own. So my brother was my mentor in how to behave, how to act, how to be cool. And then professionally, he's my closest friend and someone I look up to, very much. He's mature. He started from a young age. He now runs a very large venture capital firm himself. But he guides me on big and small decisions, professional and personal. And so I think having a sibling a few years older than me was really lucky. And yeah, I attribute a lot of my success to him too.
So what were you like in high school if your brother was the popular one?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I was unpopular, but I definitely wasn't popular. It's a good question. What was I like? I was definitely very much, I think naughty is probably the wrong word because, I don't think I was naughty, but I definitely was someone who liked to break a little bit of the rules. I hated having so much structure, and it's probably honestly why I became an entrepreneur. I hated having set period times of class that you couldn't leave early, even if the material was done. I hated that we had to stick to such a specific agenda, even though kids in the class, some were interested in it and some weren't. And so, this is, by the way, pre-iPhone, which again, I think makes me sound old. But so no one had phones in the class, no iPads, no laptops. But I'd constantly be reading books, storybooks in class, and teachers would yell at me. I'd constantly not want to do some work because I found it boring. So I was definitely naughty in an academic sense. And by the way, I did really badly in school.
Really?
I know people.
I would not believe that.
No, honestly, this is not to be arrogant. I think people see, hey, you've succeeded a bit entrepreneurially, and therefore you must be smart. Yeah. I had awful grades, Serena. Awful. We had 250 kids in my high school graduating class, and I think I was ranked 175th.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I was bottom tier of a public school that lets anybody in, and so but because I was so bad at school, and but I think that propelled me to say, hey, I don't want structure in my life in a traditional job. And I think that that's kind of probably what indirectly led me to entrepreneurship.
Okay, so circling back to entrepreneurship, what skills and mindsets did you learn to succeed in your business?
It's a good question. What skills and mindsets do I need to have, and what I've learned to succeed? I think that, listen, I think that this is a journey that I'm probably still learning, Serena.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that there's like one answer to this question, of course, because if you look at entrepreneurs that are 10, 50, 100 times more successful than I am, you see some overlap, but you also see a lot of differences. And so I don't think that there's one. I mean, I know your podcast is all about what is the equation, and I think it's an amazing, amazing kind of structure to think about. But I think it's also important to know that there's no one size fits all, right, in terms of skills and mindset. I think, however, there are some consistently overlapping skills and mindsets that I see. I think number one is, tenacity and determination. And, I'll tell a quick story on this one, okay? When I, you mentioned when you were introducing me that I got this fellowship in order to leave school. And I did that, and I basically, one of the entrepreneurial endeavors that I did during that time was, work to help start. I wasn't a co-founder of this business. Work to help start a business, in the hiring space, like how to recruit technical people. And the company, for a long time did unbelievably well. We were like the talk of the town. We got tons of articles. And I became extremely arrogant. I was like, wow, this is really easy. Entrepreneurship is super easy, But then things became hard. We had one rejection after another from investors. We started running out of money. And you know what? I left. I decided, I can't handle, how hard this is. And it sucked, because I thought it was too easy. And all of a sudden, the first failure that we had, I left. Yeah. Now, if you fast forward to the first company that I, really worked on, where I started and I was the CEO, again, we had rejection after rejection after rejection. And call it ego at the time, to be honest. But I was like, oh my God, I need to succeed because otherwise everyone will make fun of me. Which, by the way, this insecurity is probably another thing I need to work on. But I think what I realized through that was the 20th conversation or the 50th conversation, when finally one person says yes, that can make or break you. But you have to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. And that's determination that's consistent in every entrepreneur you'll meet. You will never meet an entrepreneur, ever on your podcast, ever, who has had only successes. In fact, you will meet people who've had significantly more failures than successes. And I think determination is a skill and mindset that I've had to have, and I think is important.
So do you think determination was inherent, or did you develop it? Did you develop it from your father that was a scientist?
It's a great question. I think I think that I developed it from a lot of different ways. Definitely from family. I would say family is definitely a core component of your equation of success, and it is. And I think that I was very blessed that and I'm curious to hear your family. I'm sure you've had a lot of determination, tenacity in your parents that has propelled you to work so hard, do this podcast. But my parents definitely, coming from underprivileged background in India, making it to the U.S., getting very educated, becoming successful in business takes a lot of hard work and failure, number one. Number two, I think athletics and sports. I think that in all athletics, this is what schools try to teach kids when they put them on sports teams, is failing. It's not succeeding, it's failing. Because once you do that, that's how you learn to face failure and
What sport did you play?
I played tennis growing up. My brother and I both played tennis. Both individually, and then we played on our school tennis team. Okay. And then I actually moonlighted in ping pong too, which I don't know if people count as a sport, but I was actually quite good at ping pong. Probably because I was a bit overweight, so that was the reason my parents put me in ping pong. But no, so I think those two things. And then I think a third one, honestly, Serena, is trial and error. Is just doing it, just basically putting a brave face on and facing failure. Because if you if you don't, then you'll never learn what it's like and you'll never be able to do it.
Okay. So circling back to the Thiel Scholarship, you were by far one of the most successful people in your generation already. What made you decide to drop out and go with the Thiel Scholarship?
It's really nice of you to say. I think that there's a lot of people far more successful than I am. So let's set the scene. So basically, my parents, and I'll attribute this literally 100% to my parents, pushed me, as I said earlier, to explore. And therefore, I graduated high school when I was very young. Okay, so I already had gone to college quite young, right? So I was very lucky in that situation again. So luck, by the way, you've already discussed family as one core equation, right? I think a second core thing to discuss is luck. We can discuss that later, but I think it's a really important part of the equation. But luck doesn't come just luckily. Luck comes from hard work. Then I think a third thing that's there is seizing opportunity, okay? And like capturing it when it's in front of you. So I started college young, and then this fellowship came around. And there was this it's called the Thiel Fellowship. And Peter Thiel, who you may have heard of, he was one of the co-founders of PayPal, and then he was the first investor in Facebook. So he made billions of dollars on Facebook. But interestingly, when he invested in Mark Zuckerberg, his one condition for Zuckerberg was that he had to drop out of Harvard in order for him to receive the money from Peter Thiel. That was his one condition. And so that's why Zuckerberg famously dropped out of Harvard to get his $500,000 from Peter Thiel. And obviously 500K became $3, $4, $5 billion. And so it was a good investment. So he ran an experiment called the Thiel Fellowship, whereby he paid 20 kids $100,000 each to basically go pursue an idea. And the only requirement was that they had to leave school. They could come back whenever they wanted to, but they could go pursue an idea, work at a startup, twiddle their thumbs thinking about ideas. They could do whatever they wanted. And I was very lucky that I got to do that. And I had a few years extra because I was young to pursue this. So, I was lucky. I got the fellowship. And I think that that's really what launched my quote unquote entrepreneurial career. And, the luck of being there while it was offered, the luck of having the few extra years, the family pushing me to have those extra years, and then seizing the opportunity when I was there. And so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of how the Thiel Fellowship came about, and that's what launched kind of my entrepreneurial career.
Did you manifest any of these opportunities, or?
Did I manifest any of the opportunities? I didn't. Actually, it's funny. I was telling Serena on the way up here that, my family, for whatever reason, is like the opposite of manifesting, which I don't know, for better or worse. My mom is extremely superstitious, and she basically refused to let us manifest anything because she thinks it would jinx it from actually happening. And so the short answer is no, because I was taught not to. But now I realize the power in it, so maybe my mom was wrong the whole time.
Okay. So what did you do with the Thiel Scholarship?
What did I do with the Thiel Scholarship? Okay, so this was 2011, I believe. I was like 18, 19, 17, 18, I don't know. I don't remember. Around there. I did a bunch of different things. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to do entrepreneurship, okay? But I had no idea what the hell entrepreneurship was. And obviously I was so young, I never started a company, done anything. So I wanted to learn from an entrepreneur. That's what I decided to do first. I basically just went online, and for like a month, I just Googled and researched cool entrepreneurs in the US. And that could mean someone who sold a company, that could mean someone who started a recent company, someone who worked at whatever, anyone that I could read about. And then the second step, which I thought, was pretty proactive of me, was I cold emailed a lot of these entrepreneurs. And, I just basically found their email address or guessed their email address. Startup people aren't very creative, actually, and their emails are usually just their first name at startup.com. And so I ended up emailing a lot of people.
How many people did you email?
That's a great question. Probably over 500.
Wow, so you guessed 500 emails.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are published online or you can find them. But yes, maybe half of them I guessed, half I didn't. That's funny. I haven't quantified it before. But it was what's cool is that while being young, Serena, like what I was back then, is people respond to your emails. Like, I think people, when it's like when you're older and it comes across as you're trying to do business with the other person and they can get skeptical. When you're young, you have such an opportunity. You have such a cool, almost like a free pass.
So at a young age, you didn't feel discouraged compared to like older kids?
No, it's a good question. I didn't. In fact, I felt empowered a bit because I almost had this like thing to hide behind that I'm young and like figuring my way out. And you got a lot of people who responded to me saying, "Oh, I'll help, I'll help, I'll help." One entrepreneur in particular who lived in Los Angeles. I had never been to LA. He responded to me, and he was a very cool entrepreneur, had sold a company to Google, and was starting a new company in gaming. And he responded and not only said he'd help me, but he said, "Why don't you come to Los Angeles and work for our new company, and I'll just give you a job."
Wow.
And so I flew to Los Angeles, and the first thing I did with the Thiel Fellowship was go work at this gaming company. It was called Scopely.
Did you have an interest in gaming, or was it just the first opportunity that you took up?
I had no interest in gaming whatsoever, which again probably makes me sound like I had no childhood. But I just didn't. I had never really played video games. The games on this kind of Scopely were like we were making these like mobile games where you like play Yahtzee against somebody like far away. You know, you do a turn, they do a turn. So it wasn't like gaming, but it was gaming. I remember moving to Los Angeles, and LA is such a driving culture, and I didn't have my driver's license because I was 17. I mean, like I went to college before I could get it, and I remember the first thing that the company paid for there was teaching me how to drive. So they got me because I had to drive to meetings. So they got me a driving instructor. So every day between 12 and 2, my calendar was blocked, and I had to go to driving school, paid for by the company. But I just moved to LA, and I started working there, and I did every role under the sun: marketing, business, this, that. I just learned on the job. I had no idea what I was doing.
Did your parents move to LA with you?
You know, it's so funny that you asked that because it's a great question because my parents were scared. It scared the hell out of my parents, right? At least college is a bit more like controlled of an atmosphere. But, you know, their 18-year-old kid moving across the country with no driver's license, like what they were doing. So it sounds so embarrassing now. Both my parents came with me the first time I went and made me have dinner with my new boss, the four of us, and basically questioned my boss about whether I'd be like taken care of, almost like I was a kid. And at the point I was like, "Oh, it's not embarrassing. It's probably what people do." But today, in retrospect, if somebody came and had dinner with me with their parents and made sure that I took care of their kid, I would probably find it charming because it happened. Plus, you know, I think Indian culture is like that. But I guess it was a bit embarrassing. They didn't live there, but they did come and meet the people I was working with. Yeah.
So I thought the purpose of the scholarship was to drop out of school.
Yeah.
What made you want to go back to school?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, at the end of the gaming company, you're right. I mean, you said this in my bio is, you know, when I worked at the gaming company, it was great, but I just wasn't interested in games, and like, you know, so I left the company, and I did a couple other things, but then I ended up going back to school. You're right. And by the way, this was probably like a insanely bad decision because that gaming company ended up selling for over $5 billion a few years ago. And so, you know, I probably should have stayed and it probably would have made some money. But you know, whatever, c'est la vie. And yeah, I had no idea what I was going to do. So I went back to school. And also, okay, to be very frank and very honest, my parents were involved in that decision too. I mean, I had immigrant parents who literally came to America so their kids could go to college. And they were like, "Sujay, you have to go back to college." It wasn't an option. It was mandatory. And so I went back to school and you know, our school was super gracious to let kids come back whenever they wanted. And so I went back to school, and not only did I go back to school and get my degree, in the US you do kind of a bachelor's first, which is the first 4 years, and then you have option of going to graduate school. I went to law school and business school, which is an extra 4 years of school to get 2 more degrees. And so it was so I kind of tripled down on the school part.
So that seems to be very successful. Are there any instances in your life where an absolute no, that's not going to work, has been turned around in your head into an opportunity?
Yeah, I'll tell you another story. Okay. This is I remember it with emotion. Obviously, I can remember this story now with you know, hindsight is 20/20. However, when I went to business school and law school, you know, in my first year of being there, again, I had no idea what I wanted to do career-wise, but I knew I wanted to start a company, like do it for real and like do it well. And I started my first real company, which was Frontier Car Group, which you mentioned, FCG, in my first year of school. And I was trying to do it simultaneous to school. Because again, it was so small, and I was like, hey, you know, if it fails, it fails, and I'm still in school. But if it blows up, then I can do both. I got cocky. And, you know, it started doing well. It started doing well and well and well and well. But by the nature of the company, I had to leave campus quite a bit to travel for work. And so I was in Boston from Monday through Wednesday going to class. And then Thursday through Sunday, I was in Berlin, or I was in Indonesia, or I was in Nigeria, or I was in Chile at our offices. And obviously it was tiring, yeah, but I would miss a ton of school. And Harvard Business School has an attendance policy where you cannot miss more than 3 classes a year. And if you do, you fail the class. And if you fail more than half your classes, you get kicked out of school. And so I missed 43 classes my first year, which was a bit more than 3. And so
how did
I failed 11 out of my 12 classes first year of business school. And I remember, Serena, like, this was also a time in which the company was doing well, but by no means does that guarantee success, okay? By no means. But I remember being in a hotel in London. I remember the hotel, Holiday Inn on Berkeley Street in Mayfair, which is where I was staying. And I remember Harvard Business School calling me. And I was like walking outside, telling me I got kicked out of school in my first year. And I remember crying. I remember just like bawling and bawling and bawling. More scared of telling my parents that I just gotten kicked out of Harvard. But, you know, also like, shoot, like, if the business doesn't work, I have nothing. You know, I have nothing. Literally, all my classmates will go through, they'll get their great jobs, and I'll literally have just been a failed entrepreneur with no degree. And I was like, you know, and I remember calling my brother, talking about my brother mentoring me. Yeah. And my brother was like, Sujay, use it as an opportunity. Like, use this as a cool opportunity to double down on your business. Because he's like, also realize that your investors, your partners, they won't want to work with you if you're in school anyway. Yeah. And so now use this as an opportunity to say you are full-time into this business and you're passionate about it. And that's what I did. So to answer your question, I turned that failure into an opportunity where I said, hey, I'm going to move to Europe. I moved to Berlin, which is where our headquarters were. And I started working 25 hours a day on the business. I was single, you know, I was there. I was just like, I had no car. I had no money. I was just sitting there in Berlin working. And we still had failures along the way. But it was that decision which led to me being able to focus and I think Frontier Car Group having a successful outcome in the future.
So was this like one of your favorite failures?
It was one of my favorite, not at the time, because at the time it was daunting. Yeah. And there were so many times between that moment and having a successful outcome where I was like, the company's dead. And then I would just have to like go back to school with my tail between my legs, begging them to let me back. And so, yes, in hindsight, it was a great failure, but I think that I wish I had the, you know, foresight to say, hey, if I can't handle it, then I probably shouldn't wait till the point I'm kicked out to leave. But yeah, it was definitely a notable failure.
Well, I have to ask how your parents felt about this when you told them.
You know, it's so funny because, you know, my mom, probably similar to your parents, have a very kind of tight-knit social circle. And I think Indians especially talk a lot. And so I think that my mom, when this happened, when she would talk to her friends and her friends would be like, what's Sujay doing? What's Sujay doing with his time? And instead of saying Sujay's working on a company, she would say, oh, Sujay's just taking a break from Harvard. And so I think that was, you know, that's how she was coping with it internally. You know, they were not happy, to be fair, but I think that, listen, I think that at the time I was probably more scared than I am now, where I'm probably closer to having kids than I was, you know, this was 10 years ago almost. And where I think you just need to let your kids fail and find their way, to be honest, because if they don't, they won't know how to do it. So I probably am exaggerating how my parents reacted, but I thought they were very unhappy.
So tell me more about this company.
Okay, so the company was called Frontier Car Group, FCG for short. It was kind of a weird company, to be honest. It's, you know, I'm Indian. I grew up in the U.S., but we spent a lot of time abroad in emerging markets. I think I remember talking to you. You spent a lot of time in Jakarta growing up. And I think that in places like Jakarta, Indonesia in general, but also places like Chile, Mexico, there's a really big population of people that are getting richer. And I thought, you know, it'd be very cool to build a business in countries like this. So the first company was basically doing used car sales in these countries, you know, finding a way to make that whole process more legitimate, because it's always a sketchy industry. But it's a transaction everyone makes. They have to have a car in these countries. And so we put a lot of technology around it. We made it very transparent. We could get financing through us. You can buy and sell cars, kind of do anything you think of in the whole used car space in emerging markets. And yeah, and I think we had a really good run of it. We basically grew that company into 13 countries around the world. I got to travel all over the world, and I had a really great team around me. So that makes it sound more glamorous than it was, but it was a very good journey that we had.
Was age ever an issue for you, being so much younger than the rest?
It's a really good question, Sarita. I think so. How I was, I started the company when I was 23, and I ran it until I was about 26, 27, which, yes, was definitely young. I think it also helped that I had facial hair from a very young age, so I don't think many people knew how old I was, to be honest. But the short answer is, yeah, it did. But these are things that you just have to circumvent and figure it out. I think that everybody was older than me. However, I think that in a weird way, post this whole Facebook era, Snapchat era, where the founders of those companies were even younger than I was when I started my company, there was quite a bit of respect for young entrepreneurs too, to say, hey, people have gotten it right before. Why can't he? Yeah. And there's also ways to legitimize yourself. I took it upon myself to get really, really strong partners in the business, people who were older than me but had great legitimacy in what they had done before. We brought in really good investors who, money is money. And so that legitimizes somebody naturally if we have the ability to pay somebody a salary or open an office. So yes, it was definitely. But I think there are ways to circumvent, and I don't think that should be a barrier for anybody.
And then after this, what was next?
So, listen, that company went through tons of ups and downs. I mean, there was times in which, Serena, I didn't know if I'd be able to meet my payroll the next month, meaning I don't know if I could pay my employees the next month. That's how little money we had. We got, again, luck plays a huge role into this, huge role. About 4 years ago, a very large company came in that's publicly traded and ended up buying us for a lot of money. And our company was kind of a perfect fit with their company. I don't know who else would have bought it, to be honest. So if they hadn't, I don't know if we would have, because again, so much luck plays into it, but we were able to sell the company for a lot of money. And what's funny, going back to your question of school, is Harvard Business School told me when they kicked me out that the only way that they would let me back in was if I had resigned from this company. And the day after we sold the company, I resigned because the new company took it over and they ran it. And I just forwarded that resignation email to this guy at Harvard Business School asking if I could come back. Because I knew even I had no idea what I was going to do next. And so I was like, yeah, might as well go back to school and finish. And I just forwarded him the email with the line, can I come back? And he let me back. And so what was next is I went back to school, sold the company, went back to school, and ended up finishing my business school and my law school degree over the next few years. So that was it. Yeah.
Then after this company, what do you think was the most fulfilling and demanding part of being an entrepreneur?
I would separate those two. I think what's most fulfilling, what's most demanding are a bit different. I think what's most fulfilling is actually not, at least to me, and I think people would have different answers to this, was not what the company built or created or whatever. That's definitely fulfilling, to be honest, very fulfilling. Like seeing something that you built actually work. Like for us, it was like selling a car. But like to go as like a layman into one of our stores in Mexico and see people like transacting on something I built was very cool. But the most fulfilling thing, I think, was the employees that we had and like the fact that I got to employ them and they got to like make money through something I did. I know it sounds weird, but it was cool to me to see somebody, especially those who had a family, because it felt more powerful, come work for a company that I had started. We pay them a salary. They really love the company. And then when we sold the company, they were proud of the achievement and they could, make money on that accomplishment. It's cool to see. Like, it didn't, I don't know if it changed people's lives, but like it really, made me feel like I built something that, was greater than myself.
How big was your team?
When we sold Frontier Car Group, we were about 3,000 people. And so it was a large company, but I would say kind of 500 very core, more senior level people at the company across the world. So that was fulfilling. Demanding, I think, is how lonely entrepreneurship is. I mean, again, this podcast is probably not about sugarcoating anything, but entrepreneurship is lonely. It's super lonely, because when you're working at a company, like if you and many of your friends will go on to be like really successful business people, probably. That could mean going to a company like Goldman Sachs or Google or Facebook. And when you enter, there may be 10 people entering across the world at the same time you are, of roughly the same age. So you almost have like a class. You almost have like peers in which you can, tell the bads and the goods, and almost have like teammates. As an entrepreneur, you don't. Like even if you're friendly with people in the company, you're still working with them, and sometimes in a more senior junior level. And so you don't have many friends there, and you can't, people don't truly know the pain and the loneliness of it. You feel the highs by yourself, you feel the lows by yourself. And there were times in which, I'm not that emotional of a person, but during Frontier Car Group, when we were almost running out of money, where I'd be on an airplane and just crying, be like, oh my God, I've dedicated years of my life. I'm going to lose people's money. I'm going to have people, lose their jobs. But that also propelled me to work so hard to make sure that didn't happen. So I think that was the most demanding thing, being lonely.
Okay. So you already had a successful exit, and most people would have taken it easy, but instead you went back to school. What was the impetus to start another business after Harvard? How did the idea come about?
It's a good question. So I ended up going back because I had no clue what I was going to do after. And honestly, I think that when you start meeting a lot of entrepreneurs, again, listen, I think that anyone would be naive and just lying to you if they said it wasn't partially about money. Because obviously, money is great, people want to have success, etc. But it's not all about money whatsoever, and it's not at all about, I was too young. I didn't care about that part. It was more just about the things that were fulfilling and demanding that you had asked about a minute ago. So I knew I wanted to do something else. I loved it. I loved the highs and the lows. I loved the flexibility that entrepreneurship gave me. So I started thinking about what was next, and I kind of identified this little niche in the market in my last company. So I was like, hey, might as well start it, and see what happens with no risk. If it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well. And so I started another company, Serena. It's called Merama, yeah. Merama, and it's an e-commerce business in Latin America. I'm still doing it. That's my full-time job now. I'm the CEO of Morama, and so I'll let you know what happens. But it's a cool company, and I think having success in the last one very luckily has given me a bit more comfort in starting this. And what I mean by that is, I was so stressed in my last company at every major decision, and now I feel like, having had those experiences, I feel like, hey, listen, something hopefully will work out. So I feel like my stress level has come down a bit. But anyway, let's see what happens. But that's what I'm doing now.
So can you share more about Morama?
Sure. So Morama, it's an e-commerce business in Latin America. We've basically created a few different brands that primarily sell in Latin America, and we only sell online. So I think what we're very good at is building tools to sell online, a lot of the, how warehouses work, for example, how shipping works in Latin America. And then we've built some very cool products. And so one of our brands is a very large supplements business that sells protein and creatine and vitamins. Another brand is a cosmetics brand. And so, yeah, it's basically just a set of brands that we sell a bunch of stuff in Latin America. Is the new company.
So I'm wishing you the best of luck in this business, but how do you define success for your business and for businesses in general?
No, thank you. That's very nice. And how do I define success? Well, listen, I think that there's different kind of definitions within that, obviously. But I think for me, how I define success is I tried as hard as I humanly could. And maybe that's a bit selfish, to be honest, because I know businesses are kind of greater than just myself. But if I think about if I would be disappointed or not walking out of a situation, it just, by the way, this applies to all walks of life, not just this. If you ever go into I played tennis. If I ever go into a tennis match and I lose, and I walk off the court and I'm like, wow, I played amazing. but I still lost, I don't feel bad about myself. But if I leave and I'm like, I was lazy and like that set and that set, like you feel like, damn, I should have like worked harder, right? And same thing on this is I feel fulfilled if I leave situations, but like, I gave that all I could. I was ethical in the process, and it still didn't work out, but whatever, it didn't work out for that reason. So that's how I define personal success. How I define kind of group success is, did we build a product or a tool or something that somebody could use in an intangible way, that didn't exist before? And so rather did we just sort of recreate the wheel? Like, hopefully not. Like, do we actually create something that somebody can use that's new? So those are probably how I define it in both ways.
So now we're going to do a really quick rapid fire round, which I want you to answer without thinking twice.
Okay.
So let's begin. I recently read the book Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss, and I came across a very interesting set of questions, which I do want to ask you.
Okay.
If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, getting a message out to billions or millions, what would it say?
Do, don't think.
What advice would you give a smart-driven college student about to enter the real world?
Start a company.
Who are the 3 most influential entrepreneurs that you look up to and draw inspiration from?
Elon Musk. I would say Peter Thiel. Mark Zuckerberg.
Can you rank some factors behind a startup success?
Factors behind a startup success. One is luck, and right place, right time, which factors into luck. And number 2 is team. Are there the right people who can do the right things that have complementary skill sets? Number three, is culture, which is driven by team. But are you kind of fostering a culture of people wanting to create? And number 4 is money.
Okay.
Every company needs money, sadly. I don't think you can avoid it.
Can you assign percentages to them?
That's a good question. Around a company's success of those 4, I would say luck is probably 50% of the entire equation. I would say team, culture, and money is probably split equally into the other 3. So 16.5% each, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Name 3 books that have made an impact on you.
3 books that have made an impact on me. Let's see. I think that weirdly, all 3 books that I'm going to talk about have nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but I think interesting have made the biggest impact on me in just how I live my life. One is Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. It's a story of like elderly people and how, in this case, an Indian author who's a physician learned to kind of, his parents were aging, how sad it is. I think it's taught me the power of work-life balance. I think a lot of people do 23 hours of work a day and don't have any time for anything else, and it's just taught me like what's important in life and has allowed me to slow down a bit. I think that's number 1. I think Hillbilly Elegy, it's the story of kind of this, kind of more isolated part of America. And I'll put another book in there, Behind the Beautiful Forevers, very similar book to Hillbilly Elegy, which is why I feel okay putting them together. It's a story of a slum in Bombay. And I think what it does, it just humanizes the world. It shows people who are in significantly worse off circumstances, who just have to power through, and it kind of it makes you really want to do good for the world, or at least impact the world in some positive way, or be charitable. I think that those are 2. And then I would probably say, I don't know, maybe it was a funny one, but I think The Social Network, I guess that is entrepreneurial, excuse me. I remember reading that book right when it came out, before the Facebook movie, and I was like, wow, this is cool, I want to do this. And the story of how Facebook got started.
You already shared the success factors of a business, so what do you think the success factors are for an entrepreneur, reflecting back on your own life?
Yes, it's a cool nuance. I would say to be a successful entrepreneur, again, I don't think there's a one size fits all, but I think the factors that are always important, again, I would say luck. And luck is a big one. Number 2 is just absolute hard work. I think that nothing can beat being in an office with your partners and just working, grinding, and not being lazy. Number three is really, I think, being smart about how you're working. Just working aimlessly is not good. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, Serena, that I've seen, particularly ones that don't succeed, they just dream about starting a business, period. And they kind of just form a business idea around the want of starting a business. And so it ends up being kind of half-baked just because they want the glamour of being an entrepreneur, rather than trying to approach it as what are significant problems in the world and what are potential solutions. And then potentially one of those morphs into a company. Because then I think that ends up being a bit more focused and more powerful. So I think being smart about how you work. And I think the last thing would be team. Who you surround yourself with, I think, is unbelievably important.
Yeah, thank you. So let's leave our listeners with one last question. I'm sure you've met many interesting people in your life, but who's one person that's stuck with you? Can you give us a bit of an anecdote?
Who's one person that's stuck with me as we've built an interesting life for ourselves here? I think it's a really good question. I really don't mean this to be a cop-out answer, because I think a lot of your listeners will think it is. I think there's obviously a lot of very cool entrepreneurs who have amazing stories, but I think for me and hopefully, I think probably for you too, and a lot of our kind of children of immigrants or children of immigrants that are listening here, I think probably the most powerful person to me is my own grandmother. And obviously I've met my grandmother, but I think I shouldn't say that. Many people are not lucky enough to have met their grandmother. But I think I was, and she's grown up with me. And, I think that even as early as 40, 50 years ago, people had ridiculously different lives than we did. And a lot of our families sacrificed so much to get us to where we are today. And, our lives are literally night and day different than theirs. And usually for the better. Our lives are probably better than theirs were, in all senses of the imagination, but they did it for us. And I think that it has always motivated me to leave the world in a better place professionally. And then, I want to have kids one day, is to make sure my kids are encouraged and ambitious to do something really great in the world, and hopefully, leapfrog me in terms of personal and professional happiness and success. And so I think my grandmother's probably really powerful for me, because it always reminds me of that.
And there you have it. A story that begins with structure and discipline, moves through a rebellious streak, fueled by his hatred for structure, and ultimately embracing calculated risks and focused determination. Growing up in a household where education was paramount, Sujay's path reflects both the influence of his upbringing and his own drive to push boundaries. At the heart of it all, he credits his parents for giving him direction, his brother for being an unwavering role model, and his own willingness to challenge norms. Rules, after all, were meant to be questioned. Whether it was cold emailing 500 people or literally finding addresses for startups, his proactive spirit set him apart. But if there's one thread that runs through it all, it's luck. Throughout his journey, he was quick to highlight the role of luck. Being in the right place at the right time opened doors that hard work and strategy alone couldn't. And what truly moves the needle? It's a cocktail of luck, the right team, a strong culture, and smart decision-making. Sujay's message is clear. Success isn't just about the hustle. It's about being intentional, working with the strong team, and knowing when to act. To all entrepreneurs turning in, it's not just hustle. It's about smart work, the people you journey with, and a dash of serendipity. Based on Sujay's Google form, which he filled out before the interview, resilience stands out as a top factor contributing to success at 12.05%, highlighting the importance of overcoming challenges. Luck, mentors, family, and financial support each play an equal role at 10.84%, while adaptability also matches these contributions, emphasizing its importance in entrepreneurship. Work experience at 3.61 and company-specific knowledge at 6.02% have smaller impacts, but the overall takeaway is that success comes from a balance of resilience, adaptability, and support, with luck tying everything together. I look forward to exploring luck further with my next guest, as Sujay's story shows that it's not just random, but a critical driver in making its right moves at the right time. Thank you, Sujay. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for sticking out till the end. I hope you found this episode valuable. We might think there's no formula for success, but it seems like we're getting closer to cracking it with each conversation. If you have any suggestions on who I should interview next, feel free to drop me a message at my email, which will be in the bio. And remember, the insights you've heard today could be the very thing that moves the needle in your own entrepreneurial journey. Catch you in the next one.